Welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
I'm assuming you expect me in post to boost that so that an uncomfortable level so that it stands out distinctly from the rest of the podcast, correct?
All right, listen. Was the greatest movie moment of all time when in the Lego Batman movie, Bane speaks for the first time and you realize they just did the voice?
So, in case it's not immediately clear, we are talking about The Dark Knight Rises this week, a movie that is divisive, to say the least. Not so much to us, but to Jackson's sanity, perhaps, is where the true division occurs.
I mean, let's not understate like how important this movie is to me in a bad way, because I think without this movie, the horse cast would not exist. I think that if I hadn't hated this movie so much back in the day, I wouldn't have been nearly as inclined to fight people about movies, meaning I wouldn't have been nearly as inclined to fight you about movies, meaning that we wouldn't have developed the movie fighting rapport required to start a podcast like this, and we wouldn't have done it. And now we're here. So if you hate us, hate The Dark Knight Rises. We can blame it. So, I mean, I'm kind of giving up the ghost on my tone, I think. But, you know, I suggested this movie because for that reason, and just the way that the blockbuster movie landscape has changed so much in the almost 10 years it's been since its release, I've been curious if, like, the bar has been set so low that I'd find something to appreciate about it. ... We're going to leave it at that for now.
Well, you might be wondering, if nothing else, why we're talking about The Dark Knight Rises seemingly out of the blue. And that is probably because we have not really mentioned what we're doing right now. In the past couple weeks, we've been distracted with guest episodes and just going hog wild with shit. We're still in the midst of Blockbuster Weeks 2, the sequel. And this movie, The Dark Knight Rises, while we did not cover The Dark Knight during our Blockbuster Month Spooktacular, that was because we had done it once before, and so instead directed to the second highest grossing summer blockbuster of the time, Shrek 2, obviously. So now, when it comes to the sequel weeks, it's time to go back on what was the original blockbuster of that year, that decade of the 2000s, The Dark Knight, and we'll dig into the sequel, The Dark Knight Rises. And clearly Jackson has a lot of feelings about this movie. And Jackson, I really do wish I could go with you on this journey, go with you on this hate-filled just tirade. But honestly, the most that I feel about this movie is tired.
That's a fair way to feel. It's a pretty exhausting movie. It's a very exhausting movie. No, I mean, I probably only hate this movie so much because I love its predecessor so much. Like, there are worse movies than this, but
we've talked about worse movies than this many a time.
Many a time. Like, this isn't, scratching near the zone of like a Brightburn or AVPR, like nothing like that. It's just this movie is baffling in a few ways, which make it sort of interesting and sort of funny. In fact, like, I've been genuinely struggling. I've gotten in the habit. Like, I have a letterbox now, Jackson J. Keller, if you want to go see my scores. I've scored every Horsecast movie, if you're curious. And I just don't know whether to give this movie 1 or 2 stars. And the central thrust is basically, like, is Bane funny enough? Does Bane make this watchable enough to warrant a 2-star rating? And I genuinely don't know.
So that's what this episode is about, essentially. It's going to be Jackson's quest to uncover whether The Dark Knight Rises is a 1-star movie or a 2-star movie. That's the central thrust of this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Buckle up, I suppose, for a Jackson self-discovery extravaganza.
All right, I want to, before we launch into this, I want to tell a story that I think I've told on the podcast before, but is all the more of like a credence that this movie was very important to my development as a person, as a critic and a writer. The Dark Knight Rises was a turning point. And the brief version is, I first saw this movie like the week it came out. We didn't go to the theater because we were vacationing in Chicago. There was already like the big scare about, the shooting that happened at the premiere. And we're just like, all right, we're on vacation. We're going to wait. We actually rewatched Batman Begins in order, we had a DVD, and so we watched that, and we're like, that wasn't as good as I remember, but it was still solid. I still enjoyed it. And I remember both me and my friends at the time, we were like, if The Dark Knight Rises can be at least as good as that, I will be satisfied. And because we knew it was never gonna like match up to what we thought about The Dark Knight. Heath Ledger was dead. That wasn't gonna happen. So when we got home, we arrived, and then immediately the next day there was a grad party. We went straight from our Chicago vacation to my friend's graduation party, and everyone was trying to talk about it. We're like, whoa, we've been on vacation. We haven't seen it yet. And so we literally left this grad party in the middle of it to go see it, and then came back 3 hours later. And I, of course, fucking hated it, and my friend absolutely loved it. We spent the rest of the night bickering. However, that's not where the story ends, because later, me, that same friend, and 2 others got together to do a round table discussion. We were trying to launch our little high schooler podcast. Our first episode was gonna be a round table discussion on The Dark Knight Rises, and it started with everyone giving their rankings, their letter grade for it. And I gave it a D, of course, but everyone else was like, oh, it was solid. They gave it, I think, anywhere from an A to a C. Scores are pretty across the board. And throughout the course of this lengthy discussion, at least an hour, I'm sitting here bringing my case because, man, I just fucking hated this movie. And by the end of it, people start talking about, Jackson had brought up some pretty good points there. I think I'm actually gonna, drop my score a little bit. Everyone had dropped their score by a full letter grade after I was done tearing it to shreds. So I'm actually pretty proud of that. I'm pretty proud of my persuasive abilities as a shit brain high schooler. And what's fucked up is that I thought that my complaints, I thought that my problems with it, I thought maybe I'd be kinder to it because this was sort of the end of an era, the Dark Knight trilogy was sort of sold as this grand vision by one filmmaker. We'll get into later why that was not true, but it was sold as that. And, Christopher Nolan, say what you will about him, and I think Sean is going to.
I'm going to say a lot about Christopher Nolan here in a couple seconds.
Say what you will about him, but he unquestionably has a voice, which is more than you could say for a lot of big budget films these days. He's one of the few directors consistently making these sort of big budget movies that has a strong voice. So I thought that I'd maybe find more to appreciate, some of my high schooler dipshit CinemaSins opinions would melt away to find more to enjoy about it. And I was shocked. It was a shocking experience watching this again because I felt with that expectation of oh, it can't be that bad. Going back to it, it was just as bad as I remember, and in all of the same ways. It is a fucking mess of a movie. It's embarrassing in a lot of ways. There's stuff at the time. We alluded with our Bane gag at the beginning. The moment I walked into the theater And I remember like my heart sank. I literally like whispered under my breath, "Oh no." The minute Bane opened his mouth, and like the audio mixing was like this Sonic Adventure 2 like nightmare that was louder than the rest of the sound. It felt like Birdemic, embarrassing. So I couldn't believe it. Like there was all this stuff going on in this movie. And there were some people like, yeah, like Bane was so badass, dude. Now Bane was memorable, but I don't know if badass was the word that I would use. But I'll have plenty of opportunity. I've already taken up the floor. I'll be taking up a lot more of the floor, but that's basically where I'm coming at from this. This was my Joker origin story for being a fucking shitheel like movie podcaster. So thank you, The Dark Knight Rises. Thank you for doing this to my brain.
You know, I was going to come in here with like a lukewarm take on Christopher Nolan for the most part. But oh boy, you know, with that awareness, that level of knowing who to blame for who you are, I really do think that much like convincing your high school friends, I'm gonna have to dock Christopher Nolan a couple letter grades just for turning you into who you are. So sorry, but I'm pretty sure that does bring him down to like an F tier director for me. And that's just how it goes.
I mean, that's fair, because like Christopher Nolan, like if you think about it, had possibly between like the fact that he made my two favorite movies and that he also made this, more than any other single person who like perhaps that I don't know in real life, like any media finger, Christopher Nolan has probably had a bigger hand in my shaping my perceptions on media than literally anyone else. It's quite possible.
So I do want to take this moment to talk about Christopher Nolan and kind of explain myself a little bit, because if you are a longtime listener of the podcast, you're going to be aware that after the Inception and the Dark Knight episode, specifically the Dark Knight episode a bit more than the Inception episode, I was not kind to those movies. I wasn't like entirely dismiss out of hand, these are bad movies, but I just didn't particularly gel with them in any strong, profound way. And at the time, I just kind of let it slide. But I've been marinating on it more and more and trying to understand why, oh, why do I not like Christopher Nolan when everyone else seems to hold him up as some great director? And I will open this discussion up to Jackson after the fact for him to tell me how I am wrong and how I have missed so many points and what exactly I'm getting wrong about Christopher Nolan. But I do want to be clear that this is strictly an opinion. And honestly, I don't know what can be presented to me that's going to shift that. And that's not to say that I'm going to sit here and be stubborn like, no, I'm right and you're wrong. No, that's not what I am. That's not what I come to this podcast to do. I want to come to this podcast and leave being like, oh, wow, I do have a respect for that film now, or I do have a changed opinion because I'm open to that. I want to have an open discussion about it. So, Jackson, please, when I am done here, you're going to have things to say. I can promise you that, especially with this bold and brash opening statement I'm about to make. But understand that I am not here to slag off your favorite director or anyone who might be listening, just to kind of explore why I didn't feel that differently about The Dark Knight Rises than I did about like The Dark Knight or Inception or...
Man, that is like unfathomable to me. But all right, that's what I'm here for.
I was going to say, listen, you want hot takes, Jackson? You want me to come in with hot takes every week? Here you go. Here you fucking go. You ready for this? Christopher Nolan is a step above Michael Bay. That's where I'm coming at this from. Yep. And let me preface this. Yes, let me preface this by saying, number one, I don't think Michael Bay is that bad of a director. I genuinely don't. I think his movies are schlocky and stupid and bad. I mean, they're bad movies. But they're entertaining garbage that you can sit in the theater and watch and enjoy. Now, Christopher Nolan is kind of the opposite side of that coin, in that he is a very good director. He is a very talented director. He knows how to do a lot of things with the camera that Michael Bay absolutely cannot. However, he reaches this point, this pinnacle, where I don't feel anything about those films, much in the same way that I kind of leave of Michael Bay films, where I'm just kind of like, yeah, that was a movie I watched, great. And Michael Bay is worse of a director than Christopher Nolan for sure, but neither of these directors' movies really have any staying power with me. And I loved Inception when I was growing up. I loved The Dark Knight growing up, but watching them as an adult, I just don't have the same spark that I once did. And I think I've been thinking a lot about this, and I wonder, for me, if I look at these movies as technical and competent filmmaking that just doesn't have the spark that I am looking for to either elevate them into interesting greats a la the Kurosawas of the world, nor are they like troubled, weird, quirky films that I connect with that will turn them into something like a Hellraiser 8. And I would like to just let everyone know, the fact that I did spend 40 minutes 2 weeks ago defending Hellraiser 8 means that you can and should disregard literally everything that I am saying in this exact moment. My opinions are no longer valid. But I stand by the fact that I just do not find Christopher Nolan to be an interesting filmmaker. I find a lot of the action to be better than a lot of other films out there currently, but still underwhelming. Like, there's just not a whole lot of things that really jive with me and gel with me, and like there's some visual spectacle to it. But even now, I'm like, okay, it doesn't feel like 2001 visual spectacle. It feels like Marvel level visual spectacle. And maybe this is just Marvel tainting my opinion of movies that I watched in the past, but they just don't have that same punch they once did. Beyond that, I mean, I struggle with like finding broader thematic resonance in these films, and that's not to say that it doesn't exist, as I'm sure Jackson will yell at me for the next 20 minutes about. But I watching these movies, I always leave being like, yeah, that was that movie, and like, sure, it was fine, but again, I'm not necessarily going to sit there and noodle on it anymore. I did when I was in high school, and that might genuinely be the most damning thing I can say, is that Christopher Nolan, to me, feels like a director I have moved past. He feels like a director that does really well in those intro film classes because people are just starting to figure them out, and watching his movies now, respect them as decent movies, but I just want just a little bit more from them, either to make them bold and brash and interesting, or bold and brash belongs in the goddamned trash interesting. So I don't know. Like, that's really where it sits for me. And again, I'm not here to just try and slag off people's favorite directors. It's just watching these movies, I just don't feel that spark that I look for when I'm watching any movie at all. Like, I don't have that spark of love for them, and that very well could be a me problem. Again, Hellraiser 8 Defender has logged in, but that's where I am with Christopher Nolan. He is aggressively fine.
When you put it that way, as like, you know, when you're comparing your N level feelings about him compared to like Michael Bay, as like, I feel like I don't get, you know, as much out of him. That's fine. That's valid. That's your, you know, personal preferences, your taste, like, you know, what it feels to you, like, that's all that. However, the reason why I came in so hot is that I think and you gotta understand, you're putting me in a difficult position here, because this is the director of like my two favorite movies and possibly my least favorite movie.
Oh, I'm well aware. I know what I'm doing. Yeah. There's a reason that I saved this discussion for this movie.
Yeah. Because when it comes to every aspect of filmmaking, from writing, shot composition, pacing, building of tension, even just being able to follow a scene coherently. I mean, Christopher Nolan is like, not just better than Michael Bay, but better by leaps and bounds. Like, Michael Bay movies are nearly incoherent. Now, granted, that is a criticism that I would level at The Dark Knight Rises at times. And it is not to say that I don't think Christopher Nolan is a perfect movie or that a perfect filmmaker, that The Dark Knight and Inception are perfect movies. They are not. But what Christopher Nolan is extremely good at is that he is extremely good at building tension. He is extremely good at building drama between characters. He's extremely good at introducing lots of big ideas and themes, but still keeping the viewer engaged and like dramatizing that through action and conflict. Because these are action movies for the most part, and we want some like character dialogue and stuff to build that up, but we also want like to see and feel like the action of those characters. So in the Dark Knight episode, I talked about how, in terms of fight choreography, like, it's not the best action in the world. And that's only going to be a bigger problem in this fucking movie. But what he's good at, at its best, is, creating like a number of like memorable creative set pieces that have an actual impact on the story. Like, that sort of the tension of like the truck chase and the Dark Knight is like the crowning example of this. But even in just like the way the Joker fights in that movie, like, there's a lot of character built into that, even if the choreography is not that impressive. And that's basically why I love Christopher Nolan so much. His characters don't always have the best dialogue. It's not the best writing dialogue, not by a long shot. I like some of the speeches in these movies, but there's just as often that it's like, an embarrassing, like, Hideo Kojima, like, awkward line.
Metal Gear, the clean slate.
The clean slate. And, he's extremely good at portraying, like, character through action and through visuals. At his best, he's a very good visual storyteller, and that's at his best. Now, he's not always at his best, but even in like some of his lesser movies, like an Interstellar or a Tenet, that like I don't get as much out of because the story is not as rich. The characters aren't as memorable as something like a Dark Knight or Inception. There's still like a lot of great like visuals and tension-filled moments that like we can always get by. So to a certain extent, like, having the most recent Christopher Nolan film that I've seen be Tenet, after aside from The Dark Knight Rises, like, I get it, because Tenet is very much that. It's very much like all style, no substance. And I think it's pretty stylish. I enjoyed Tenet. He can direct an action scene, and I think it's noticeably better in composition than like a Marvel, which is just like a CGI nightmare of noise, like a Jurassic World. Like, whenever I think of those movies, I think of just gray cartoon blobs. But Christopher Nolan actually like plans out his set pieces. Like, those are, he's committed to practical effects, and it shows. And that's what I appreciate about him. Not so much that his stories are the deepest, but the amount of depth he gets out of those stories while still making a compelling, fun, like, action movie that has a lot of forward momentum and a lot of like, good sort of building of tension in that classic sense. And there's something about that style, because I would almost say it's like very Hitchcockian in that way. Another director that you don't care so much for.
The Hitchcock Nolan pipeline is very clear, to be sure.
Yeah.
And like what you're saying here, like, I can tell that you have a clear passion for this director, but even as you're describing it, I'm just like trying to visualize these moments in my head, and I kind of see where you're coming from on some of them, but a lot of them too, I'm still like, yeah, but a lot of his action scenes are still undercut by like some weird goofiness to it, and like I don't know, the bat bike I really don't like at all in these movies, and I think part of it is just genuinely I don't jive with the visual languages of his film, and in that as much insofar as I don't think that what he thinks is cool is cool for myself. So a lot of these big, broad set pieces that you really like, I'm kind of more like, this is fine, whatever. I don't particularly care about it. I mean, like the stuff that everyone remembers is like, oh, that was rad as hell. That's so good. I'm like, it was a thing that happened in this movie. You're right about that. No denying that. And credit where credit is due. Hell yeah, practical effects. You know, if we're on this podcast, we're all about them practical effects. But even here, I really wish I could get behind the passion that you have for Christopher Nolan and his films and how much people love them. And like, I am so deeply in the minority here. And I know that even my friends who care, like, some of them agree with me, but they still love Christopher Nolan more than I do. And I can't fully shape why. I just don't jive with his stuff, but I think it just boils down to he doesn't do anything particularly interesting for what I am looking for. And I just look at a lot of his stuff and be like, yeah, that was an action blockbuster. It was pretty good. I'm not gonna really think about it again.
I mean, yeah, and that's fair. I mean, I think a lot of it does come down to like individual aesthetic preference. I mean, obviously, like, you know, Christopher Nolan shaped a lot of my preference for something that's more grounded. Like, I like that his action set pieces are pretty small scale. Like in Inception, it's supposed to be impressive that, like, you know, they fold a street and they like walk on the side. But I like that because so much of the movies, like, he takes his time with his pacing. Lots of it's just characters like talking to each other, and then when something happens, it's not that big, but, you know, it makes an impact for me. And I certainly prefer that to the Disney approach, which is just like, we're gonna previs, you know, a lot of loud, annoying, you know, action set pieces that don't drive the story forward at all, and then we're just gonna plop those in and be annoying compared to like all the other maybe or maybe not interesting stuff going on. I think the core difference is in a Christopher Nolan movie, there is almost never, at least in his good ones. Remember, we'll talk about The Dark Knight Rises in a second. But in his best work, there is rarely, if ever, a action scene or an action set piece that does not drive the story or the characters forward. And that is a very simple thing. But when you're pacing a movie and like you're trying to get an audience engaged in the drama and like following the action, that does wonders for me, because with so many other big blockbusters, it's so obvious. It's like, you know, we're in story mode. Black Panther's the worst about this, because that is a movie with a good script. Like, that is a movie where, like, you know, there's characters and themes, and
the fighting,
you know,
for the most part, is even in service of those themes right up to a point.
Up to a point, especially like in that like last big battle where you just know like it's only happening because they mandated a battle here, and like, you know, you're just blobs of like CGI robots and stuff like in a big gray battlefield, and it's like, I'm done. Contrast to The Dark Knight. Ending of The Dark Knight is, you know, Batman trying to climb up a building and not get caught by the cops while the Joker is like ready to just blow up a couple of guys on a boat. And he manages to make, like, whether or not the Joker blows up the guys on the boat into a really, really rich and like tension-filled thing, despite being really small scale. If I had to summarize the difference for me between The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, is that they both want to portray the city of Gotham as being like this chaos-filled wasteland brought to its knees by this menacing villain. But the way that the Joker did that was so much more compelling to me. It felt like, you know, this was someone who just, you know, he even says in the movie, just a couple of drums of oil and a couple matches, like, you know, I made this city like lose its mind, and like just through a few like simple acts of terror and really like focusing in on the human cost of that. Like, the stakes of The Dark Knight, despite being smaller, feels so much larger than The Dark Knight Rises, which has this dumb Marvel bomb. The movie is basically Batman, that gif of Adam West running around with a bomb trying to get rid of it. That's the movie. Bane like uses a bunch of explosives to like create like an isolated feudal state of Gotham, and like it's supposed to be like a bigger escalation than anything we've ever seen, but it's just Marvel noise. And I hate it so much, and it's so antithetical to what I like about his other movies.
I don't disagree with you, is the part that is so killer to me, because I do think that The Dark Knight Rises is a worse movie, but I mean, I wish I felt more about these films, because I'm not kidding when I say that I feel about the same in both The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. And I know quantifiably The Dark Knight is a better film, because even as you're describing it, I'm like, yeah, the action, the rising action, the tension is all way better there. The plan makes so much more sense, despite the fact that it's supposed to be chaotic and nonsensical, whereas The Dark Knight Rises, the story is just an absolute mess, and Bane's whole deal is just completely fucked in multiple ways, and it's terrible. And yet I wish, I just can't shake the feeling of like, it was a Christopher Nolan film, whatever, and then move on with my life. So that's my screed on Christopher Nolan. But I also know that Jackson is chomping at that bit to start tearing deep into The Dark Knight Rises.
And I guess, like, I think it really does come down to, for you, like, you know, I think it is just a guttural, like, aesthetic inclination or disinclination. I think in general, this sort of more like low key grounded, you like things to be a bit more out there, I think, in general. Is that fair to say?
I mean, like, it is. There are obviously exceptions to the rule. Again, I cited Kurosawa early on as a director that I would hold above Nolan in a lot of ways. So, like, there are still a lot of grounded things to it. Like, I've found that I like Westerns a lot recently, and those are generally fairly grounded, but they're still at least a little out there, and that they're Westerns or samurai movies or whatever. Yeah, I mean, that might be part of it, but like, even that's the thing though too, is that Nolan, even in his wackiest, like, fucking The Dark Knight is a wild fucking movie. It's about a man talking like this the whole time, fighting a clown. It's goofy, and I part of the reason that I think that these movies kind of get under my skin is that they are really self-serious in a lot of ways, and I don't know if that's a bad thing. Again, this might just be something that rubs me the wrong way about them, but like, the thing that I remember most about rewatching The Dark Knight was just thinking so many times, this is so silly, it's stupid, and like really struggling to get over that hump to like really engage with it where it's at. So I don't even necessarily know that that's the issue in that way.
I know that I like it when a movie, I would rather like a dumb idea, generally speaking, like take itself 100% seriously. I think when it works, it's more engaging to me, because I'm not like rolling my eyes and thinking judgmental thoughts about how damn clever this writer thinks he is.
Boy, it sure is a good thing we didn't do that thing that all the other action movies do. Am I right? Proceeds to do the thing that all the other action movies do. But we did it tongue in cheek with a wink to the audience, so that makes it okay.
The thing is that, like, in general, like, you are correct. You know, the core concept is that, you know, it's a man dressed as a bat fighting a clown. That's silly. But that the movie just commits and is like, yes, you're going to get involved in this man clown drama, and you're going to like it. What, you know, that's what I'm telling you. And I'm like, good. Yes, I am going to like it. Thank you. It's the Hideo Kojima thing. Like, I love that so much of the meme dialogue in Metal Gear Solid is presented without a hint of irony. That, like, you know, it's just, sometimes it's just stupid. And when it is stupid, that makes it funnier for me. And when it's smart, that makes me feel more rewarded.
Yeah, no. I'm right there with you, because I think Hideo Kojima and Christopher Nolan, like I was already thinking about this exact thing before you even got into it.
They've got a lot in common. They've got a lot
so much in common. But the problem is that Hideo Kojima like takes, is this stupid? Yes, double down on it. And Christopher Nolan goes,
that's the difference.
Is this stupid? Yes, keep right at it. And like the doubling down, I think, is what elevates Kojima properties and like really brings them up to something that I can really engage with and be like, this is stupid and it's funny and it's weird and it's bad and it's great all at the exact same time. And that's the Kojima guarantee, baby. Whereas Christopher Nolan's like, don't think about it and just take it at face value. And I struggle with that in some places, and I don't know why. It's Christopher Nolan films that I really just struggle with.
There are parts of these movies, The Dark Knight in particular, where he's better at making you forget about the silliness than other times. In particular, comparing, I like both of these characters. I think they're both well-written characters, but like the Joker versus Harvey Dent, I am not once thinking about the fact that the Joker is like a silly clown, because Heath Ledger is genuinely terrifying and it's a genuinely mesmerizing performance. And like for me, I am not once taken out of the moment like that. Two-Face, on the other hand, like the burn effects and like, you know, the CGI and some scenes with Aaron Eckhart, overall I like him, but there's definitely some parts where it's like, ooh, I don't know about that choice, Chief, where it pushes a little too far. So it's a spectrum. Like, you know, he's definitely better about asking you to commit to the bit at certain points than others. He's not always good at holding up his end of the bargain. I will, you know, concede that. Like I said, I'm not blind to the fact that these movies have faults.
Jackson, I just wish you would stop being such a fucking Christopher Nolan fanboy and engage with me on a discussion here where it's not just you screaming fuck you repeatedly into the microphone. I wanted to have this actual engaging conversation, and like, you haven't stopped swearing at me and engaging in a level conversation as respectable adults with one another. Calm down.
I'm not calm. The Dark Knight Rises did it to me. But no, we really got to wrap this up. We're approaching the 40-minute mark, and I need to. Ooh, I'm fiending for it.
Listen, I'm going to put you on blast here and say that 10 minutes ago I tried to segue us into it, but you had to drag me back into the debate about Christopher Nolan. I was trying to let us move on, but then you're like, I have to get one more word in there about Christopher Nolan, and I'm like, well, Jackson, if this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing here. This is the part that I find more interesting. Let's talk about Christopher Nolan.
Because I find it interesting too, and it's a good discussion. But Sean, this is the most difficult position I've ever been in on this podcast, because I fucking hate this movie.
Honestly, I thought you were going to say this is the most difficult situation I've ever been on this podcast, because I love you, Sean, my co-host, but these opinions are so bad I might need to quit. So I'm happy that at least we're not at that point yet.
No. Can I make fun of Bane now?
Yeah, let's get into spoilers here. But before we do, as always, before I can let Jackson off that leash, and boy, oh boy, is he fucking pulling, we have to say, if you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. Tell a friend about us. It's the only way we grow. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/BADHcast. Follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/BADH_cast. Buy Jackson's book, Kelly is Unbreakable, available now on Amazon. Next week, we are actually gonna revisit a movie that we've already done on this podcast before, but by God, it's been so long, and we just keep talking about it. And how can we not revisit the sequel to the greatest movie of the 2010s, Jurassic World Forgotten Kingdom, or whatever the fuck the title is? The Jurassic Park series is a terrible series of names.
You always get Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom's name wrong, but my favorite thing is that you get it wrong in a different way every time.
Listen, it's like Jurassic Park, Jurassic World Forgotten Kingdom, Fallen Kingdom, Jurassic World, Jurassic Park 3, Forgotten Kingdom. What the fuck are you people doing? At least the new one's called like Desolation or something, so I'm not gonna fuck that one up. All right, let's get into spoilers here so Jackson can yell about Bane.
So it's hard to know where to start with this because I don't want to trot out the old laundry list because there's, like a lot of times when I talk about a controversial old movie, it's like, oh, isn't it stupid that they sent every single police officer in Gotham into the sewers? Oh, isn't it stupid they did the ADR on Bane's voice bad? Oh, like all that stuff. Like, everyone knows that stuff. Everyone's been making fun of that stuff for years. For me, the problems are more fundamental. And the fundamental problem with The Dark Knight Rises is this. And I think it's pretty simple in that this was sold to us as the conclusion of the Dark Knight trilogy. But this was very obviously never meant to be like a trilogy. The Dark Knight is a very, very standalone movie. Like, you can watch that movie without having seen Batman Begins, as I did for the first time when I saw it when I was like 13.
I haven't seen Batman Begins in years, and I've seen The Dark Knight, and I still knew what was going on.
Yeah, so The Dark Knight was very self-contained. The ending of the movie is like, you could see that, you can watch that movie and just sort of like extrapolate that, like, oh, Batman, he's gonna do what has to be done, symbol, blah, blah, blah. He's gonna keep being Batman despite the odds, which is why it's so weird that he doesn't keep being Batman. But that's also something people have been making fun of for years, not really the overall problem. The problem is this. So they had this movie very obviously not set up to lead into something. Like, you could make a third one. And it sounded like when Heath Ledger was alive, Christopher Nolan maybe had some ideas about making a third one. But especially after he died, like, Christopher Nolan had gone on the record that, at least at first, like, he was pretty hesitant to make a third movie. Like, oh, like, how often does the third movie turn out good? I feel like I kind of said my piece with, like, the Batman. And the conspiracy theory is that, Warner Brothers basically agreed to let him fund his little passion project Inception if he came back and did a third one to make them more of them sweet Batman bucks, which I find believable, but that's just hearsay, so who knows. So when you're making a third movie and to, The Dark Knight, you look at it and you're like, okay, we don't have Heath Ledger. That's a big problem because we cannot just recast the Joker. We simply cannot do that. It's too soon. That performance was iconic. Everybody loves him. It would be seen as crass and tasteless. We're not going to do the, Rise of Skywalker thing. Joker's got to be gone. We can't do anything with the Joker. So what do we do? Then their answer was basically, well, let's dredge up all the League of Shadows stuff. And that's fine. But The Dark Knight had, like, nothing to do with that. So you end up in a weird position where you are making your third movie and you have, like, all of the stuff that made your previous movie such a mega hit that made it worth making a third movie in the first place. That's gone now. That has nothing to do with the story. Like, the Dent Act is, like, the only thing about The Dark Knight that matters in the plot of The Dark Knight Rises.
Can I just
it's
jump in really quick with perhaps the moment that I realized immediately, like, oh, this is going to be a really bad movie upon my rewatch. And that was when they're talking about the Dent Act. And this really does tie into everything that you're saying quite nicely. And someone offhandedly, very, very briefly, and it was something that Sam actually looked up to make sure that I heard it right, because when I said this, she's like, no, they didn't say that. What? No. Just casually, offhandedly, this takes place 8 years after The Dark Knight. Just snuck in under the radar, and that feels like that time skip is fucking crazy to me.
No, it's insane, and I don't know why. It's not like that much time had passed in real life. It was like, yeah, no, it was nuts. But I think it was just to distance it from the Joker as much as possible, because no one even mentions him. Like, we don't have to reveal what happened to him. Like, obviously, you don't want to definitively say what happened to him. You don't want to say he got executed. That'd be, disrespectful. You don't want to, like, leave the possibility open. You don't have to confirm what happened to the Joker. But that also makes it weird when, Bane lets all the criminals out and he's not there. Like, it draws attention to itself.
Cillian
And
Murphy
nobody
is there. Scarecrow is there.
That's very funny that Scarecrow, for some fucking reason, is like a freedom of the people tribunal judge. Very stupid. Funny, though.
Also, I do just have to admit that I did, after seeing Cillian Murphy, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
In this movie, I did quickly Google Cillian Murphy to find out whether he is genuinely hot or just really hot as the Scarecrow as a judge in this movie. To which Google then immediately sent me a survey asking whether I found what I was looking for when I searched Cillian Murphy, and I had to be like, I don't know. That's a weird question, Google, because I was Googling Cillian Murphy for a very weird reason. The answer, by the way, is that, I mean, he's not unattractive, but like, man, I don't know. There's something about him as a Scarecrow judge in this movie that is just very attractive.
It's that position of authority. He's got that power.
It's the hair for me, honestly. That hair, that hair is real good.
So, regardless, basically, like, this movie isn't a sequel to The Dark Knight. It's a sequel to Batman Begins. Rachel died. Harvey Dent died. That's all that mattered in The Dark Knight. The Joker, who was that? This man who brought the city to its knees. There's no implications on that whatsoever. We passed the Dent Act, and everything was fine in this, once hellhole city. Great. Except it's not great, because then the problem with basing your movie about, making it an extension of the League of Shadows stuff from Batman Begins is that League of Shadows is kind of the worst part of Batman Begins. Because the problem with Batman Begins, we'll do a micro review of it here. Batman Begins is good when it's about what it says in the title, when it's about, like, Bruce Wayne learning to be Batman and he's like, developing his philosophy and all that stuff. That's interesting. It's really got the classic, superhero movie origin story problem, because you have all that character development and stuff, and that's like great. And it's like, well, what are we going to do for the movie, for the, the action? There's got to be action, right? It can't just be, Batman training in the mountains. They're like, you're right. So we're going to have this stupid ninja clan try to put gas on the city. It's always trying to put gas on the city, and it always sucks every time. But that's what we're going with here. We're going with that on an even bigger scale. How do we make this bigger than the League of Shadows? And more importantly, how do we make this different than the Joker? And their answer was to go bigger than the Joker, because Bane isn't just as smart as the Joker, theoretically. He isn't just as capable of making plans. Bane in the comics is known for his intellect, figuring out the identity of the Batman and breaking him. You got to include all that stuff. So we have a Joker, a poor man's Joker, basically, but he's also beefier. So, he can actually fight, which becomes a problem because Christopher Nolan is not good at choreographing fistfights. Or I shouldn't say that. I like a lot of the fistfights in Inception, but because the characters in The Dark Knight have that, like, big, bulky, 2000s rubber armor, they can barely move. It looks like you're smashing G.I. Joes together. And that's what the finale of this movie is, and it sucks. Any fight between Bane and Batman is supposed to be this big, important moment, like, oh, you adopted the dark. Like, Bane's turning all his tools against him. But the actual beat-by-beat action in the fight, so uninteresting that who could care? So we have that. And so we're going to up the ante on the Joker. We have a villain who's just as smart as the Joker, and he's stronger than the Joker. He's Cell, the Joker was Frieza. And now, well, the Joker had the city held hostage. We got to up the ante, though. We can't just do that. We have to up the ante because this is the conclusion of a trilogy that was totally planned to be a trilogy and not just a marketing gimmick. Totally a complete, developed 3-act story, the Dark Knight trilogy. It's not just a really great movie in between an okay one and a really bad one that have more to do with each other than they have to do with the good one. So Bane just rigs a big bomb, and he wants Batman to watch it and suffer for a while because he hates Batman because he killed Ra's al Ghul, even though it doesn't make any fucking sense that anyone involved in the Bane camp would give a shit about Ra's al Ghul because he abandoned them. You have Talia, she wants to, like, get revenge for her father, even though she hates her father, and that's stupid. And Bane is basically just a big old simp, and that's lame. sucks. I hate it.
Just to jump off talking about Talia really quick and her desire for revenge for her father. This was the one moment that. So, listen, just bear with me because I promise this is going to be damning with faint praise. But
Okay.
it's going to sound like I'm going to be like, I thought this was a good idea, but it's not. Because, like, for a second there, when Talia al Ghul does reveal herself as, like, the mastermind, there's a brief second where I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting as like a responsibility for your actions type of conclusion to everything. Like that's not a terrible idea. And then everything else comes crashing in on it. Most notably, the Dark Knight's like, hi, did you fucking forget about me? Because it's kind of weird that there's a whole thing in between these movies that has nothing to do with that, huh? And that fucking sucks. And then you kind of realize that her showing up and just being like, take consequences for your actions invalidates literally everything else that had happened up to that point.
Oh.
It's bad. It's bad. There's no denying that. But as I said, like when I was watching this, there was a brief second where I'm like, huh, that's kind of interesting. And then like the weight of that thought brought me to my knees. So
you could have made that twist work, but like the character motivations don't make any sense at all. It's just not given enough time to breathe. So, you know, all you're just left with is a, you know, overall pretty generic revenge motivation, and then, you know, your big meme villain.
I was gonna say there's still too much of a focus on Bane is the problem. Like that's the biggest issue is that Bane's whole motivation amounts to literally nothing. Absolutely jack shit. And we've spent the entire time, he's got more screen time than Batman does, for fuck's sake. I don't know if that's true, but it feels like it.
It feels like it. It feels like it. And, you know, he's in a lot of ways, he's supposed to be like Batman's dark foil, you know, like in a different way than the Joker. And that like he's not Ra's al Ghul's son, but at least like, you know, the alternative method split off from the League of Shadows. It's not like every idea in here was bad, but instead of developing any of them, it had like 3,000 and then just threw them all up in the air and said the plot's about exploding a big bomb, because the only way we can think of to raise the stakes after gassing the city and like, I mean, the Joker stakes were lower. The Joker wasn't going to actually blow it up. He was just going to like send the city into terror. They lowered the stakes from Batman Begins to The Dark Knight. And it was so much better. But then there was like, nah, let's just have a big stupid bomb.
It was so much more focused in The Dark Knight that you could feel the tension because it was personified down to like 40 people total, like in the entirety of the film. Whereas this one, you spend so much time wondering about what the fuck is happening in this city because it's been in lockdown for several months. And I want to know what happened during that fucking lockdown. I want fucking Snake Plissken running around, escape from New York style during that whole scene. And instead we get literally nothing about it. We don't really explore any deeper into it. It's just... that is potentially one of the biggest wastes, in my opinion, of this movie is this Gotham in lockdown. Okay. Also, just as an aside, the plot of this movie is literally just Arkham City. You've played Arkham City, right, Jackson?
Yes, I have.
And Arkham City predated The Dark Knight Rises by not too much, but enough that even the Catwoman twist in this was already done in Arkham City.
Yeah. Oh, God.
It's just right. Arkham City, but Arkham City is more interesting because it forces you to sit in that world and actually explore and see what the damage has been done as a result of these criminal activities and understand how it shapes the world and everything. And here we get none of that. Absolutely none of that, because we have to watch Batman climb out of a fucking hole as a metaphor for the thing he did once before to overcome his fear and blah, blah, fucking blah.
It's so trite. It's like Zack Snyder level. And the funniest thing is, this is another thing that people have been making fun of the movie for forever, but it's no less true and no less of a absolute damnation of this movie structure. And Christopher Nolan normally, if nothing else, has really well structured movies. But the fact that like we spend the whole first part of the movie, there's actually stuff I like in that first 30 minutes when like we're building up and it could maybe be going somewhere. But then Batman slaps his magical leg thing on. I don't even know why they bothered giving him like a bum leg if he was just going to slap the magical thing on it. Just have him like be old and grumpy. Not even that old. I don't know what
just
the
out of shape.
this was.
Just out of shape.
Just out of shame. So like, you know, you didn't need the stupid leg thing, especially if you're just going to hand wave that. And then like he has this whole like, you know, we're going to take responsibility. The Dark Knight rises and then he falls and then he rises again. And it's like, what the fuck is this? That whole first hour of the movie is like a complete waste of time.
Yes. Yes, it was. It's incredible as well, just as an aside, how they managed to make Bane somehow boring anyway in this film, considering Bane in the comics is literally a Mexican wrestler who is constantly doped up on basically cocaine steroids. And that is fucking rad as hell. What the hell are we doing with just a fucking big goofy mask? Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, let me explain the big goofy mask, because you see, Bane covers his mouth with his face visible, whereas Batman covers his eyes with his mouth visible, because Batman speaks the truth openly and freely while hiding his identity, and Bane reveals his identity while masking his intentions. You see what we did there?
Bane in this is not a good villain. I will say he is extremely entertaining for all the wrong reasons. There is a reason that people have memed the fuck out of Bane, and there's a lot of funny little quips. Some of them funny in the way that's intended, most of them not. Half the time, I still have trouble understanding him. Even that's the great thing about them boosting his audio. It didn't work. There's a lot of scenes where I could barely tell what he was fucking saying. But Bane is laughable. And I Tom Hardy, love him to death, horribly miscast. Like he looks shorter than Batman a lot of the time, because Tom Hardy's pretty short, right? Am I imagining that?
I don't know. I will Google it right now.
Well, even if he's not, like
he's 5'9".
5'9". Okay, so he's about as tall as I am. I'm pretty short. So yeah, not exactly like a big hulking brute. Like you would need. You know who could sell like a Bane would be, oh fuck, what's his name? The guy who plays Drax, Dave Bautista.
Yeah.
Dave Bautista. Like that's the guy who could physically sell the presence of Bane. Tom Hardy is not that guy. He's just too much of a normal looking dude.
Okay, I'm sorry. I need to derail for a quick second here, just while we're talking about short people and height and shit.
Yeah.
For perhaps the scene that I laughed the absolute fucking hardest at in this entire film, and I don't even know if most people would notice it. So there is a rule in cinema that obviously all rules are more guidelines and you can break it to effect in certain regard. In this case, I don't know why this was broken. I don't think it was intentional. Just succinctly called, don't chop the chin. If you have a close-up or somebody on camera, the whole thing, you can cut the top of their head so you just see their eyes down. But cutting the chin in the shot is just really weird and off-putting. And it's just something like human psychology. Don't do it. It looks bad. So but later on in the movie, when Talia al Ghul is in the car with the bomb and Catwoman, Gordon, and Batman are all standing outside of it, there's one shot where it's a shot reverse shot where it's Talia, and then it shot reverse shots over to the three of them. And Gordon is in the lower right corner of it with half of his chin missing, and the other two are just looming over him. And it is the funniest fucking shot in the entire movie. It is so bad in such an incomprehensibly weird way. It looks like Gandalf and the Hobbits, honestly. It is so weird.
Oh God, I not that I'll ever watch this fucking movie again. I've had my answer. It's bad. I'm never watching this shit again. But like, man, God, I wish I could think of exactly what shot. I know the scene, but you know, I didn't quite catch on to this. But
I'll pull it up and send it to you later.
Perfect. No, I mean there is a lot of like awkward framing in this movie, and granted, that's it's not like that's not true of some of his other movies, but the difference is why I love those movies is that there is a very, very strong narrative and thematic core to Inception and The Dark Knight. Those are movies about characters, they are about themes, and they're about pretty sophisticated themes. You know, they're not like going to be like a 2001, like it's not that space brain, but like they do have like ambiguities and like questions that they're meant to leave you with. And I think it does a good job of doing that and illustrating a lot of those conflicts through action. That's what he's good at. But this movie's about nothing. And I think it's like at most we have like some horrible, speaking of Hideo Kojima, the Tale of Two Cities stuff is inserted here about as smoothly as the fucking Moby Dick shit in Metal Gear Solid 5. And it's so like thuddingly obvious and just like Commissioner Gordon reading the last lines of A Tale of Two Cities at Bruce Wayne's grave. It's like, come on, guys. Like, we're really going to do this? Weirdly reactionary. The Dark Knight, of course, got those accusations. And, you know, they're not all unfounded. I do think that there's more to that movie than just the surface level claim of, like, you know, George Bush was good, actually. That often gets leveled at it. This movie, though, is like, man, Bane's going to create, like, a false flag, like, uprising of the people. And, like, we're going to valorize the cops in a Batman movie? Are you fucking kidding me?
Big like, fucking propaganda energy on this one.
Like the same cops who were like corrupt and like a horrible, miserable institution that like, you know, the common people were better than in the previous movie. Like this is what I mean. Like it's not obvious on the surface, but there's so many like fundamental differences in the approach here. And it's like the Dark Knight, like half of that movie was a tragedy about how like one of our principal heroes falls because like, you know, the police and the systems failed him and like everything went wrong. Now here we have like, oh man, I'm Catwoman. I'm like, you know, haha, this is around the time of Occupy Wall Street. Fuck the 1%, right? Except wait. Now the 1% are fucked, and maybe that was a mistake. But it's like, you know, who cares? Because what it's actually about is a dumb Darth Vader man with a big stupid bomb. It's a Marvel movie, and that's the most baffling thing to me is that like this is just as brainless as like a bottom tier Marvel movie, and I don't know. This was made to compete with the Avengers, and like the Avengers set the standard for what a Marvel movie was. Like, you know, what we think of as a Marvel movie, you know, obviously it started with Iron Man. Like Iron Man set the tone, but Iron Man and the Dark Knight had more in common than you would think on like a revisit. Like, you know, the MCU as we know it was born with the Avengers. So it's not like we're trying to be more like them, because those phase 1 movies were pretty low key, all things considered. I don't know why we're doing this way. So when I hear like theories that Christopher Nolan basically just phoned it in, you know, because it's like, fuck you, I got to make Inception, got mine. Here's your dumb, you know, schlock. Oh, what do we got? We got Tale of Two Cities. Like it sounds believable to me because that's what it feels like. There's no vision, there's no central driving thrust, there's no, you know, moral question to ponder, and there isn't like that question of like, is the truth good enough? Is like, you know, is the ethics of like, you know, telling the truth worth maybe the ramifications of that? There's nothing like that in this movie. It's just a movie about two beefy men punching each other, and it's not even very well staged punching.
Well, as a punchline to that, I found the clip. I have posted it in our Discord channel if you would like to take a quick look at Jim Gordon the Hobbit.
No.
I will be posting this on Twitter when the episode goes up. I absolutely adore this shot. It is inscrutably bad. It is so good.
Forget a Hobbit. This man's straight up a borrower. God. Oh,
boy.
That's a good meme. And you know, I guess that brings me to my final question, because this is sort of the quandary, is that like, I'm going to make a bold and brash claim, all right?
Lay it on me.
Batman v Superman has more artistic merit than The Dark Knight Rises. Batman v Superman, for all of its faults, for all of its many, many faults, it is about ideas. It has a central vision. It's more like The Dark Knight in that way. And the question is, like, you know, how much did they fuck up on the execution? And they fucked up really bad. Christopher Nolan is unquestionably a better filmmaker than Zack Snyder. This movie isn't unwatchable. And in fact, some of the things that are bad about it are funny. So on a moment-to-moment level, it's more entertaining than Batman v Superman, which is mostly a miserable slog of waste potential. But there kind of was no potential here, or very little. Like, you would, in order to like mine good things out of the millions of ideas, you need to shave away like 9/10 of them, and then, like, you know, dramatically focus in on the good ones that remain. So I don't know. I don't know if this is worse than Batman v Superman.
I was gonna say that's really my big question for you is, what did you put Batman versus Superman as in your letterbox?
I'm pretty sure I put it as a 1 in my Letterboxd.
So would you consider it better or comparable to?
It's strange because they're bad for different reasons. I think that, like, I'm almost looking at it on two different metrics here. Like, it would be a lot easier to fix Batman v Superman and make it into something resembling a real movie. I mean, by some accounts, you know, the director's cut almost does that. Like, you know, I haven't watched it myself, but, you know, there are some people who stand by that. So in that sense, Batman v Superman might, like, it has, you know, that's why I was careful with that phrase. It has more artistic merit, because I think it does. Like, this is a nothing of a movie, but Batman v Superman is also extremely painful to watch in a way that this isn't. Like, there's some stuff I like unironically. I really like Anne Hathaway in this. Like, she's really charismatic. I like Bane for ironic reasons. Bane is really funny. So on a moment to moment level, there are things I enjoy about this, and that makes me want to give it a 2. But I also want to give it a 1 because it's such an insulting, like, ambitionless slurry of a movie. You see what I mean?
So I know that you're a big no half measures guy, but do you think it's worth breaking that to give it a 1.5?
It might be. You might be right, because I think, yeah, it's the memes. I do remember the memes, and I'll probably, you know, people have been quoting Bane for years. They're going to keep doing so, and it'll never stop being funny. But at the same time, like, I think I got to give it a 1 star, because no matter, like, how agonizing or not agonizing it is compared to Batman v Superman, like, this movie makes me madder. Like, I'm angrier at this movie. Like, I expect better from Christopher Nolan than this. And, like, it's not like he tried anything and failed. He tried nothing and failed. And that is maybe my least favorite kind of movie. So even if on the moment to moment level, it's arguably a better movie, like, in principle, this, like, shakes me to my core, I think. I think it's a 1 star.
And there we have it. Ladies and gentlemen, after years of debate, years of uncertainty, we finally have a verdict on The Dark Knight Rises. It's a bad movie. Hang on. I feel like we've known that for a long time.
There are people that still defend this movie. There are people who still, like, you know, who have, like, the same take as you, that is like, oh, I can't really tell the difference between it and The Dark Knight, but in, like, the opposite direction, that it's, like, as good. And that's an even more baffling stance to me, because you know, if you just don't like Christopher Nolan, then, you know, whatever, fair play. But, like, if you do, how can you look at, you know, these two movies? Is it really just that Bane is funny enough that like for some people that's all we need. We see the funny masked man like say quips is that might be it, but I don't know, because it's just unfathomable to me otherwise.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I did a quick search on it, and it's got like an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, so people really seem to do like it. I don't know. I don't know.
It reviewed well at the time, but also keep in mind, sometimes public opinion or even critical opinion tends to shift. Like, I know, of all things, Metroid Other M actually reviewed pretty well with game critics.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, for sure.
So, that's, I do remember this movie reviewed well, and that made me reassured. I'm like, okay, so it's probably not as good as the Dark Knight, but like, I'll at least still have a good time. And I was like, I remember I read a lot of those reviews, and I'm just like, I do not understand where you guys are coming from at all. And like, I am a fanboy, I'll admit that. Like, I'm very deeply invested in the Dark Knight and Inception, but like, man, I don't think my criticism of this movie, like, it's not just fanboy like nitpicks. It's not just, oh, isn't it stupid that we sent all the cops into the sewers for 6 months, ding. Like, it's not just that. It's like, this is a movie that is like full of structural nonsense and like loose ends and borrower Commissioner Gordon. Like, there's a lot about this movie that just screams like an obvious rush job, and I don't get it. I just don't.
I don't know, man. To be fair, you did say, people like me who compare Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises as on a similar level. I would like to just be clear that I do admit that one of them, even if I am lukewarm on both of them, is definitely better than the other. Just to put that out there, that I might be a charlatan, hack, fraud, moron, nutcase, but I'm not Alex Jones, so it's got to put my flag somewhere.
Bane is built like Alex Jones in this. Did you notice that?
I hadn't. That's something I need to unpack now.
Tom Hardy's the same height as me, so obviously I've got no room to talk, but like, I mean, in general, I think it's less a matter of just his height and more about like, this is not the kind of role that he does well in. Like, compare this to, Christopher Nolan loves reusing actors, so he was Eames in Inception, and like, he was a fun, like, quippy, charming, handsome guy, and like, that's what Tom Hardy's good at. I mean, he can even do like Reserve, like, he's good as Max and Mad Max, but like, that's a lot of like, you gotta cue into like some sort of humanity. He's not good as like a hulking monster, and it ends up being really silly, both visually and especially in terms of audio.
Yup.
In order for me to truly explain why I hate this movie so much, I'd need to do like a Plinkett review length thing. So we got to stop.
I was gonna say, let's wash our hands of it. I think you did a really nice, succinct 20, 30-ish minutes of a back and forth underscoring like what your core problems with this movie are. I think we've nailed it down quite a bit, as well as my ambivalency toward most Nolan projects. Again, I am sorry to Jackson in particular. I know this is his favorite director, ? But
I think that if there's a director, I can't decide what my favorite movie is. It's one of two. Both of them were made by the same director. I think that qualifies. But I mean, you don't got to apologize to me. I mean, I understand. I understand where you're coming from. And like, I think that, to say one last little thing, I think the fact that like, you don't gel with him, like, in order to not gel with like a director's style, like, that director has to have a style. That director has to have an MO, and that's not gonna appeal to everybody, and that's just fine.
That's actually really fair. Honestly, I hadn't particularly considered that. So I guess some points back to him, and fuck, I mean, that might unto itself make me kind of revisit some of my thoughts on it. Like, that simple sentence of the fact that you don't means that there's something there kind of shifted my viewpoint. It's as simple as that. Honestly, I need to find something to grab onto, and that might be it for Christopher Nolan. Is just like, I don't gel with what you make, and that might make your stuff better for me. As weird as that sounds, but that's kind of how it goes sometimes for me. Like, I like movies, even movies that I don't like. I like movies. So
yeah, well, because with Christopher Nolan, like, you know, one of the reasons that I treasure him is that, you know, this is someone, again, because it's not like these movies. You know, back in the day, it had all the Inception memes of being like, oh, dude, it's like the high schooler's first deep movie or whatever. And there's some truth to that. But, like, it's not... The movies aren't, like, completely stuck up their own ass. Like, the movies are still, at their core, like, trying to be blockbusters. They're still trying to be, like, big action movies.
Fun. They're trying to be fun. The word you're looking for is fun. Are you okay? Do you remember what fun is?
Not after watching The Dark Knight Rises, I don't.
Hey,
But no, seriously, like, you got, you know, haha, like, you know, dead wives and Batman voice and silly puzzle boxes and whatever. But, like, at the bottom,
not the good type of puzzle boxes, though.
But, you know, there aren't too many other directors of big budget movies, or like, they're increasingly small in number, that, like, have that kind of clout to keep making these kind of big, loud, you know, maybe dumb movies that are still driven by a voice. Like, otherwise, you have filmmakers like that. You have, like, an Edgar Wright, but a lot of them will get, like, chewed up and spit out by the studio system. And you know, I just I gotta champion my man. You know, he's sticking up for practical effects. He's sticking up for, you know, directors with a voice. I have no choice but to stand.
That's fair. And I have no choice but to sit with my arms on my side and recite things that high schoolers get made fun of for saying, because I also was like, this is kind of like a film school student's first favorite film. So oops on me, poo-poo for me. If you want to yell at me about that, please Twitter Sean_McKinda. I'm very easy to find. Tell me why my Christopher Nolan opinions are wrong. I'm going to definitely ignore what you're saying, though, because it is an opinion and you can eat shit.
Damn. I'm Jackson Keller. You can find me on Twitter at Jackson J. Keller. Don't ask me to do a fucking Plinkett review of The Dark Knight Rises. There's no point. This movie had, like, no effect on the culture aside from Bane. So there's no point in me doing that. I'm going to keep working on my other stuff, like my book, Kelly is Unbreakable. It's great. It's better than The Dark Knight Rises.
That's been your tag for a while now. We keep doing movies where you can say it's better than X. And I'm kind of worried about the direction this podcast is heading. You can follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast, where you can find great images like borrower Jim Gordon. God, that shot is so very, very good.
It's so good.
It'll also let you know we got new stuff coming up. Like, we had a bonus episode go live on Monday, the week that this episode also goes live. About 17/7/76, the American football story written by John Boyes, in which we get deeply, deeply, deeply philosophical about our beliefs and how we engage with media. It's a great fucking episode, a banger if we've ever heard one. Go listen to it.
Great fucking banger.
And how do you get access to that? Well, that's patreon.com/BADHcast. Go check it out. You can pay us for bonus episodes. There's a bunch of really great stuff we really appreciate. We especially appreciate our $10 patrons.
Thank you so much, Julia, Travis, Pat, Mom, Summer. Great. Y'all are great.
Also, thanks to those that have the use of our theme song is Suicide, alternate take off them, High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go check them out wherever you can. Buy the music, stream the music, Spotify, Bandcamp, all that good stuff. Go do it. Also, thanks to 25 years later, site.com. There's a little button in the corner that you can click on. But while you're there, you should check out everything over there. There's a lot of really talented people doing a lot of really talented writing. Go read that shit next week. It's Jurassic World Kingdom.
I'm very excited to rewatch this. I don't know if we'll have anything more meaningful to say about it than we did the first time.
We 100% will not. What are we talking about? We don't lie to the audience.
I'm just really, really excited to watch my kind of dumb schlock.
I'm so fucking pumped for Dinosaur Resident Evil again. Hell yeah. Bye.
won't you go?